What's up guys, VenomousStare. I'm breaking out the webcam again today because I've moved houses and it's been a hot minute since I've done a StarCraft 2 video. Now I know a lot of you were probably wondering, well, like, StarCraft Remastered just came out, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the StarCraft 2 scene, where's VenomousStare been? Or at least if you're one of my 600 or so subscribers, you're probably wondering this, as most of you have subscribed for StarCraft, and that's what this is. TLO in the top left versus Pit Drogo. I've heard this name pronounced like PT Drogo, but I usually just call him Drogo. This is the guy who really liked the Century Mothership Core style versus Zerg and HOTS. And it looks as though Dario is going to hatch first. This is Dario Liquid TLO, one of the most long-standing pro gamers in StarCraft 2. A German guy known for doing some wonky builds. He used to play Terran. Back when he had wrist problems, he actually started playing a really aggressive, cheesy brand of Terran because it was easier on his wrist than playing macro games. Interesting guy, streams a lot. One of these guys who talks about mentality a lot and doesn't really complain about balance. So if that's your thing, TLO's your guy. He does a lot of wonky stuff in game in terms of strategy. So that is why a lot of people really like him, because he brings new builds to the table. This year in his tournaments he has been losing early on to Neeb. That's happened multiple times this year. Excuse me, where TLO will just like lose early on in a tournament to Neeb. This time he's facing off against Drogo. Now Drogo isn't nearly as good as Neeb. Neeb is just so good. I mean, Neeb is a cut above the rest in terms of foreigners. He can really compete with Koreans on a consistent basis. Now there are guys like Major that can do that, but Neeb is just on another level. The dude's unreal. He actually won a major LAN in Korea. And for foreigners, which is basically non-Koreans, that's almost unheard of. Drogo did a little bit of probe harass, and it appears as though he's going to patrol his worker here. Now there are Lings out already, so this isn't really going to do anything at all. Stargate's going to be the choice for Drogo. Now I like that he hid this. I really hate it whenever Protoss players build their tech in their wall in. It's so easy to scout. And there's really no reason to do that, especially because you know Zerg is going to always camp an Overlord up on this high ground. If you don't know, on StarCraft 2 there are literally high grounds all throughout maps, usually right by the natural, that allows the Zerg to put Overlords up on them and hide them. Now if we go to Drogo's vision, he knows this is here because he's played a million games, but he can't see it until he gets his Mothership Core. Now notice Drogo's going to wall in as this Adept starts to poke around. Now what is this Adept going to do? A whole lot of nothing. Not even a kill there. It scouted around a little. Now what did it see? Not much. What was there to see? Not much. Oracle will see a lot though. The Oracle is just phenomenal for scouting. Really excellent at getting vision, and even if the Zerg has spores and they're not going to lose a bunch of workers, being able to plant stasis wards is so useful, especially against Ling-based styles, and being able to cast Revelation is very useful, so you don't get caught off guard. Mothership Core is going to range out here, and according to this probe, this leads me to believe this is a third base expand build. Now how many gates do we have? Just the two, so 2 gates and then an expand. So this expand will be relatively quick. TLO sees it with the Lings. Now the Oracle is good at kind of getting you map control in a defensive way. Mines, Revelation. And of course it can do a lot of harassment, so I'm not saying the Oracle's a purely defensive unit, but in terms of being out on the map, it's not really this unit that scraps at home while it ranges out on the map. You kind of run around with your Oracle and scout. That's how it works. You use Revelation. Most people don't really mess with stasis wards until they get a handful, but the point is he's not really going to have this Oracle at home to defend while he's also looking around out on the map with it. And you usually want to group your first couple Oracles up. That's just usually how players tend to do it. And TLO is just poking around. If Pit Drogo messes up his wall, it's really, really bad. That's one of those goofy things that can just do devastating damage if you screw it up, but doesn't cost the other player very much. So Pit Drogo kept his oracles together, and if we go to the Workers Guild, he only got one and lost an oracle, so that's really bad. You never ever want to trade an oracle for a drone. And if we go to units lost, TLO hasn't really lost much. He's ahead in workers. Now this third is done. Usually Zerg wants to be a base ahead. Charge starts, so does +1, and a Robo is almost halfway done. Now Drogo's going to start to triple flood this third base with probes. But at this point I would say TLO's doing pretty well. Those couple oracles are worth their weight in gold in the early game because energy units that pool energy and have a stasis ability or a vision ability pretty much never falls off. So whenever you lose one, whenever you lose one pretty much right after you make a second one, it puts you in this weird position where you almost gained an infinite amount of map control, and to lose something like that early on is kind of invaluable. Drogo very intelligently trying to keep a wall over here at his third. I like that he didn't just do it way out here because that's more gates, and this means that if TLO wanted to commit with Lings in the back door and force Drogo over to fight in a bad spot, he's not going to be able to do that, but Drogo's also going to be able to just reinforce his army and not get caught off by his own gates if he were to wall in here or out here. Problem is Drogo's gates are just now kicking in, he doesn't really have units, and the Link Bane's here. So the other Photon Overcharge turns on, it's a bit tardy, and there is room for a third one if he wants it, but he doesn't really need it apparently. Drogo's +1 and legs are about to finish. Now this is going to be a huge power spike for Drogo. Does he have glaives? No. So this is a weird situation where +1 zealots are incredibly good, especially if the Zerg doesn't have Carapace, but if the Zerg is going Banes with attack upgrades, charged zealots suddenly fall off super hard. So that overcharge will be used here, and this is where it gets really hairy, is when Link Bane gets into your mineral line, and look, Drogo's just going to lose an insane amount here. A really brutal, crippling loss here for Drogo, as he does dip down pretty heavily in supply, and he's trying to do a zealot counterattack. But when Zerg is going lean Bane, you're in this weird situation where the zealots are only good if you have a critical mass or there's no banelings. Speed zealots are one of these units that actually fight pretty well in little harassment forces, but when Zerg gets banelings, it's this weird thing where suddenly it feels like you're playing it feels like you're playing Protoss. No. It feels like you're playing Zerg versus Terran, but the Protoss player isn't really accustomed to splitting, and the speed zealots don't want to split, they want to charge into the army. And with baneling speed about to finish, if TLO just makes his fair share of banes, I don't really foresee him losing to this. This is one of those things that can really steamroll you and make you look silly if Protoss has a big upgrade advantage and you run out of banelings. Now TLO has quite a few banes, almost all the army dies right out the gate, and even with good micro, these Archons are just going to get blown away. Because as Protoss, what you're really relying on is the speed zealots snowballing on top of these slow-ass hydras, but once the hydras have the baneling meat shield and all the zealots die, it's no big thing. Now Drogo did intelligently make a few more gates. He did start +2. Now is Storm done? No, it's not. It hasn't started. And that's really the only ticket here for Drogo. Because if you fight with speed zealots and pure Archon into this much Link Bane, you just can't trade. It's just not the way it works. Speed zealots aren't good against banelings. And charge lots are really one of these things that get on top of valuable units that aren't able to fight them, and that's how they work. You can't really charge a bunch of speed zealots into banelings, and a lot of Protoss players have really been getting stuck with that concept and have been struggling with that. Because speed zealots are one of these units that they just want to run into the front line. The way the AI works, it just like pulls them into the meat grinder. TLO with a huge supply lead. There's no Colossus on the way. It's more speed zealots. If we go to units, TLO has one bane, so I don't know, maybe he could still lose. But he's at such a huge numbers advantage here. I'm not feeling it for Drogo. TLO just has to spend his gas on banes and he rolls over this. 8 Archons. Okay. Now he's going to lose 2 for pretty much nothing. And again, Drogo is down about 40 supply. This isn't Roach supply, this is Hydra Bane supply, and TLO has 70 workers or thereabout. He's getting a Spire, he's getting upgrades. Notice he already has +2, he has the Protoss out upgraded. Here come the get out banes, as I call them. These are the banes that you make when you're really far ahead to win. Now these aren't truly the get out banes because they're not really like laughing Drogo out of the game. TLO needs them to win, and if he didn't make them, he could still lose, but Drogo's pretty screwed here. If we go to upgrades, do you see Storm? No. Do you see Storm researching? No. Now that's big, because all of those banelings are actually a big deal. Now we see more. Now as long as TLO doesn't suicide them into just Archons for no reason, and even then, like, what do we see here? 8 Zealots. Now where are the Zealots? They're over here at TLO's base. TLO's making pure unit though. So as soon as these Hydra Link come out, they're just going to easily defend this. This is not like a force that includes DTs, and you can see, even without an adequate amount of speed Zealots, TLO still almost lost the fight. And all you have to do is a little bit of kiting. GG in, says Drogo. Okay. It was definitely over. TLO had Spire finishing. Game 2 of this series will be up on my channel. Probably turn the cam off for the next game, but because it had been so long, I wanted to turn the cam on. And Drogo loses it. Notice that he didn't go into Colossus and his Storm was really late. So you can't really just keep making Speed Zealots into Banes and expect to win. I would even venture to say that he forgot to start Storm. Anyway, that was the cast.